My name is Tori Kensington, and at 27, I learned that the people who gave you life are sometimes the ones most eager to destroy it. I was 8 months and 3 weeks pregnant, standing on the shoulder of Route 7, as freezing Connecticut rain soaked through my wool coat. Water ran down my neck and pooled in my leather boots. I kept one hand resting on the heavy swell of my stomach, shielding my baby from the bitter wind. My daughter kicked against my ribs, a fierce reminder of exactly why I needed to survive this night. My father, Preston, stared at me from the dry leather interior of his Mercedes sedan. The heater blasted warm air across his pristine tailored suit. He did not blink. "You chose that middle-class spreadsheet jockey over your own blood," he said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Walk to him then." My mother, Patricia, sat in the passenger seat, carefully adjusting her diamond tennis bracelet. She didn't even turn her head to look at me. To her, I was already a ghost, an inconvenience that threatened the pending corporate mergers she had spent months orchestrating. From the back seat, my younger sister Blair leaned over the center console. She rolled the window down just enough to let her voice out. Her laugh was a bright, jagged thing echoing down the empty road. "Your tears will not melt in the rain, Tori." She hit the button. The glass glided up, sealing them in their climate-controlled bubble. The tires spun on the wet asphalt, kicking a spray of muddy water across my legs. I watched the red glow of their taillights disappear into the dark, leaving me 3 miles from the nearest town. They thought they had won. They thought they were discarding a broken daughter who refused to play by Greenwich high society rules. They assumed I was standing in the mud, weeping over their rejection. But here is the detail my family failed to consider. I was not crying. I was waiting. Welcome to Cherry Vengeance, where quiet calculation has always outsmart loud cruelty. If you have ever been pushed out into the cold by the people who were supposed to keep you safe, you have found your sanctuary. I work as a forensic financial auditor. My job is to find the anomalies other people bury. I spend my days tracing hidden offshore accounts, analyzing forged signatures, and exposing the lies wealthy men tell to protect their empires. I deal in ledgers and undeniable proof. Emotion is a liability, data is power. Growing up in the Kensington house meant learning how to perform. I was taught to smile for cameras, wear pearls to Sunday brunch, and never speak an inconvenient truth. My entire childhood was an exercise in asset management. If you increased the family social distancing, you were rewarded. If you threatened it, you were liquidated. As the rain continued to beat against my shoulders, I reached inside my soaked coat. My numb fingers fumbled against the wet fabric until they found the small rectangular device clipped to the lining of my blouse. A tiny red light blinked against the dark material. I pressed the top button. The audio file saved with a soft click. I looked up at the traffic light swinging in the wind above the rural intersection. Fastened to the metal pole was a state-operated security camera. Its lens pointed directly at the shoulder where the Mercedes had just idled. GPS coordinates secured, audio recorded, video evidence logged. I needed them to do this. I needed the architects of my misery to orchestrate their own legal demise. It took 3 weeks of careful, subtle provocation to guide my father's legendary temper to this exact boiling point at this specific location. The Kensington family operates on the belief that money shields them from consequences. They look at other people and see disposable assets. They looked at my boyfriend Nolan Pierce and saw a threat. Nolan analyzes data for a mid-tier logistics firm. He drives a 5-year-old sedan and buys his coffee from a diner instead of a private club. He treats me like a person rather than a public relations tool. To Preston and Patricia, that made him dangerous. To Blair, it made him a target for endless mockery. I gathered my wet coat tighter around my swollen stomach and began the long walk to the illuminated gas station down the road. My boots hit the pavement in a methodical rhythm. Each step was a calculated move on a board my parents did not even realize they were playing on. The cold bit into my skin, turning my fingers white. The 3-mile trek felt endless. Every gust of wind sliced through my wet clothes, pulling the heat from my body. My calves cramped and a sharp pain flared near my pelvis. I paused, leaning against a rusted guardrail to catch my breath. I closed my eyes and visualized a spreadsheet, rows and columns, assets and liabilities. The physical pain was just a temporary negative integer that I could balance out. I forced my eyes open and pushed off the metal rail, taking another step toward the neon lights. The rain hitting the asphalt sounded like a ticking clock, steady and unforgiving. A passing truck sent a fresh wave of dirty water over my ankles. I kept my eyes fixed on the glowing sign in the distance. Pity was useless here. Survival was the only metric that mattered. By the time I reached the fluorescent canopy of the gas station, my phone battery was dead. I walked inside, dripping water onto the scuffed linoleum floor. The convenience store smelled like stale coffee and floor wax. The harsh overhead lights buzzed, amplifying the throbbing in my temples. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to stop the relentless shivering that racked my frame. The clerk behind the counter stared at my enormous stomach and pale face but said nothing. He slid a courtesy phone across the counter. I dialed Nolan's number from memory. He answered on the first ring. I told him where I was. He did not ask questions. He did not panic. He just said, I am on my way. While I sat on a plastic crate near the ice machine, waiting for the man who actually loved me, the narrative shifted 10 miles away. The wrought iron gates of the Kensington's estate parted, allowing the Mercedes to glide up the long winding driveway. The property sat on 4 acres of manicured lawns, shielded from the reality of the outside world. Preston parked near the portico, stepping out into the dry, quiet shelter of the entryway. He brushed a stray drop of water from his lapel. Patricia and Blair walked past him, already discussing the guest list for an upcoming charity event, as if they had not just abandoned a pregnant woman on a desolate highway in a storm. Preston paused by the polished brass mailbox mounted near the carved oak front door. He pulled the small key from his pocket and turned the lock. Inside sat a single envelope. It was thick, cream-colored, and bore a red wax seal along with a certified delivery sticker. Preston slid his finger under the flap, tearing the heavy paper. He unfolded the document under the glow of the porch light. The arrogance that had fueled him on the highway vanished in an instant. He read the header. His eyes darted down to the first paragraph, scanning the legal terminology. He read the names at the bottom of the page. The signatures belonged to the senior partners at the most ruthless trust management firm in Manhattan. His breath hitched in his throat. His hands began to tremble, shaking the paper so hard it rustled in the quiet night air. The color drained from his face as he read the final sentence. The document was a formal notice of the immediate and irrevocable freezing of the Kensington Generational Trust. The trust, established by my great-grandfather, was the bedrock of their family's wealth, a multi-million-dollar fund designed to pass down through direct descendants. The notice stated that the trust had been frozen due to material breaches of fiduciary duty and moral turpitude by the current beneficiaries, Preston and Patricia Kensington. The document further detailed that a forensic audit had uncovered decades of financial malfeasance, including offshore tax evasion, illegal campaign contributions, and the systematic embezzlement of funds from their family's charitable foundation. The notice concluded by stating that all assets within the trust were now under the temporary control of the firm, pending a full investigation. Preston crumpled the paper in his hand, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. He stumbled into the house, shouting for Patricia. She emerged from the living room, her expression annoyed, but it quickly shifted to alarm as she saw the terror in his eyes. He thrust the crumpled paper at her. As she read it, her diamond tennis bracelet clattered against the legal notice. Blair, hearing the commotion, came out from her room, her face still flushed, with the smug satisfaction of having left me in the rain. Her laughter died in her throat as she saw her parents' faces. The carefully constructed facade of the Kensington family began to crack. Meanwhile, Nolan arrived. He wrapped me in a warm blanket and drove me home. He didn't ask about the rain or my parents. He just held my hand, his thumb tracing patterns on my knuckles. The next morning, as I sat with Nolan, sipping tea, a certified letter arrived. I recognized the return address, the same trust management firm. My finger slid under the glued flap. I pulled out a stack of pristine white legal documents, bound by a stiff blue backing. The header text was printed in bold, unforgiving black ink. Emergency petition for temporary guardianship and conservatorship. They were officially suing me. Preston and Patricia were asking the state of Connecticut to strip away my maternal rights and hand my infant daughter over to them. In a fair world, a petition built on blatant lies would be instantly dismissed by a rational judge. But the justice system in Fairfield County often functioned as a luxury boutique for the elite. Wealthy families routinely bought favorable rulings by overwhelming the courts with expensive litigators, private investigators, and manufactured expert testimony. If an opponent ran out of capital to defend themselves, the truth ceased to matter. Preston knew this dynamic intimately. He was relying on the assumption that without access to the frozen generational trust, I lacked the liquid cash to sustain a protracted legal defense. I walked into the living room and placed the documents on the kitchen island. Nolan looked up from his computer, his dark eyes tracking my steady movements. I slid the papers across the smooth quartz counter toward him. He read the cover page. The relaxed posture he normally carried vanished instantly. He stood up, leaning over the counter to read the attached affidavit. I watched his face as he absorbed the vile, fabricated accusations my mother had sworn under penalty of perjury. Patricia claimed I was suffering from severe postpartum delusions. She wrote that I refused to feed the baby and lived in squalid, unsafe conditions. Attached to the back of the petition were the color photographs Aunt Corrine had taken just hours prior. Taken out of context, the scattered junk mail and clustered unwashed coffee mugs painted the exact picture of a neglectful, spiraling mother. Nolan did not yell. He did not throw the papers or strike the counter. His rage was a quiet, simmering current, far more intimidating than any loud outburst. The muscles in his neck pulled tight. His jaw hardened into something resembling cut obsidian. He reached out, resting his hand gently on the edge of the bassinet where Avery slept. "They will not touch her," Nolan said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "I will empty my savings. I will sell my car. I will stand in front of that courtroom door myself. They are not taking our child, Tori." I moved around the counter, placing my hand over his tight knuckles. "You will not have to sell anything," I told him, keeping my tone resolute. "They are trying to trap us in a legal maze. We are not going to navigate their maze. We are going to burn it to the ground." I left the legal documents on the island and retrieved my canvas diaper bag from the console table. I reached into the deep side pocket and pulled out the titanium solid-state drive Corrine had smuggled out of the Kensington estate. The metal was cold and heavy against my palm. This was the true battlefield. I sat at my workstation opening my silver laptop. I connected the titanium drive using a secure, encrypted data cable. The operating system recognized the external hardware immediately, prompting a black command terminal to appear on my screen. The security architecture protecting the drive was formidable. Preston had utilized a military-grade cryptographic lock, expecting it to thwart any conventional intrusion. But Preston was a creature of habit. He trusted rigid, expensive systems without understanding their underlying vulnerabilities. I launched a brute force decryption script I had coded during my early days as an auditor. The software began running complex algorithms, testing thousands of numeric permutations per second. I placed my fingers on the keyboard, ready to guide the script through the manual firewalls. The quiet living room fell silent, except for the rhythmic clicking of my keys. The cadence of my typing echoed a faint, escalating heartbeat. Thump, thump, click, click. The soundtrack, the rising stakes, bridging the gap between my physical reality and the digital war zone. The first firewall collapsed. The heartbeat tempo in my mind quickened. I bypassed the secondary security layer, isolating the root directory. Folders began populating on my screen, revealing the anatomy of my father's corruption. I ignored the financial ledgers for the moment. I needed to understand his immediate tactical strategy. I located a folder titled Legal Correspondence and opened it. Inside were hundreds of emails exchanged between Preston and his ruthless attorney, Mitchell Reed. I opened the most recent strategy playbook attached as a rich text file. The document detailed their exact plan for the upcoming emergency hearing. Mitchell had already drafted an ex-parte motion to bypass standard waiting periods. More alarming was the recipient list for their campaign contributions. Mitchell had structured a series of dark money donations through a dummy corporation directly benefiting the re-election fund of Judge Barrett. Barrett was the exact family court judge assigned to our emergency custody petition. They had not just filed a lawsuit, they had pre-purchased the verdict. The tempo of my typing matched the accelerating adrenaline in my veins. I dug deeper, diving into the deleted sectors of the hard drive. Arrogant men always believe that moving a file to the trash bin erases it from existence. Forensic auditing relies on the fact that data leaves a permanent shadow. I ran a deep sector recovery tool. A progress bar crawled across the screen, unearthing fragmented files Preston had tried to destroy weeks ago. The tool reconstructed a compressed zip folder hidden beneath layers of encrypted, junk data. The folder was labeled Evan. Inside were dates of medical records, legal documents, and financial statements related to my older brother, Evan. He was the firstborn son my parents locked away 30 years ago because his genetic anomalies did not fit their pristine narrative. Evan possessed profound neurological delays and required continuous specialized care. My parents had paid off doctors to declare him a ward of the state, then funneled money through shell corporations to a private institution that kept him hidden. They had erased him from their lives, from their family history, and from the public record, all to maintain their perfect image. This was the ultimate moral turpitude. This was the data that would balance every ledger. I compiled all the evidence, the audio recording of my abandonment, the security camera footage, the frozen trust documents, the emails detailing the bribed judge, and now, the complete history of Evan's illegal concealment. I sent everything to the trust management firm. The emergency custody hearing was a spectacle. Preston and Patricia arrived with Mitchell Reed, radiating an air of untouchable privilege. Blair sat in the gallery, smirking. They presented their fabricated evidence, their lies echoing through the quiet courtroom. Then it was my turn. My attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman I'd hired with Nolan's help, presented the evidence. The audio of my abandonment played, my father's cruel words filling the room. The security footage showed their Mercedes driving away, leaving me in the rain. The judge, Judge Barrett, visibly paled as the dark money donations to his re-election campaign were exposed. The room erupted in gasps when the details of the frozen trust were revealed, and a hush fell as the story of Evan, my hidden brother, unfolded. Preston and Patricia's faces crumpled. Blair's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of horror. The judge, caught in their web of corruption, had no choice but to rule against them. Not only was their petition for guardianship dismissed, but the evidence I provided led to a full-scale federal investigation into their financial crimes and the illegal concealment of Evan. They were stripped of their remaining assets, faced criminal charges, and their carefully constructed reputation crumbled into dust. A few weeks later, I visited Evan. He was at a beautiful, specialized care facility, surrounded by compassionate caregivers. Sitting on a wooden bench overlooking a garden, where the wind rustled through the oak trees, was a man in his early 30s. He shared my dark hair and the distinct slope of my jawline. His name was Evan. He was observant, gentle, and capable of expressing joy. When I sat next to him on the bench, he reached out and touched the sleeve of my coat, his eyes reflecting a quiet, innocent curiosity. I spent the afternoon walking the grounds with the older brother I never knew existed. I listened to his caregivers, learned about his routine, his affinity for classical music, and his gentle demeanor. I did not leave him in the shadows. I established an irrevocable care trust in his name, utilizing a portion of the clean generational capital to guarantee his permanent financial security. I hired a private patient advocate to oversee his medical needs and scheduled bi-weekly visits, ensuring he would never again be treated as an inconvenient secret. I brought him out of the dark and folded him into the family he always deserved. The Kensington legacy of discarding human beings for the sake of appearances ended permanently on that wooden bench. I broke the generational curse using hard data, undeniable truth, and an unbreakable boundary. I walked out of my home office, stepping into the bright, open space of our kitchen. The scent of roasted coffee beans and toasted bread filled the air, grounding me in the present moment. Nolan stood near the quartz island, pouring steaming dark coffee into 2 ceramic mugs. He wore a faded gray shirt and his dark hair was still damp from a morning shower. He looked up as I entered the room, his eyes holding that steady, quiet warmth that anchored me through the darkest nights of my life. Avery sat in a portable high chair near the dining table, cooing softly as she played with a soft fabric toy. She kicked her tiny feet, expressing a vibrant, healthy energy that filled the house with life. Nolan slid a mug across the smooth counter toward me. He reached out, resting his large warm hand against the side of my neck, his thumb brushing against my pulse point. He did not need to ask if I was all right. He felt the steady, calm rhythm of my heartbeat. There are no forced forgiveness narratives in this house. There are no tearful reunions with the people who pushed me into the freezing rain. I do not carry guilt for defending my child, and I do not mourn the loss of parents who only loved conditional versions of me. I chose to build something stronger. I took a sip of the hot coffee, letting the rich, bitter taste wake my senses. I looked at the man standing beside me and the daughter smiling from her chair. The air was clear. The house was safe. I pulled out a wooden chair and sat down at the dining table, surrounded by the true family I built. That's my story. Standing on that highway at 8 months pregnant, I was more than just a victim. I was a witness to the ultimate moral turpitude. My family thought they were discarding a broken asset. But in my world of forensic auditing, I knew one thing. Data is power, and the truth eventually balances every ledger. Through this journey, I've learned that family isn't defined by the blood that betrays you, but by the hands that catch you when you are falling. My parents built an empire on the shadow of reputation, hiding the tree of their cruelty, including my brother Evan, whom they erased for 30 years. As Abraham Lincoln once profoundly said, character is like a tree, and reputation like its shadow. The shadow is what we think of it, the tree is the real thing. I chose to be the tree. I chose to break a generational curse of rot to ensure my daughter Avery grows up in a house built on integrity, not optics. To anyone out there currently left in the rain, remember that your value is never determined by those who are too blind to see it. Silence isn't a weakness when you are busy calculating your next move. Living well, surrounded by a family you chose and truth you fought for, is the ultimate victory. My parents and sister are now trapped in prisons of their own making, literal and social, while I am finally free. If this story touched your heart, don't let the fire go out. Join our sanctuary of resilience and quiet strength. Subscribe to Cherry Vengeance for more stories of justice and calculated triumph. Drop a comment below and tell me, what is one shadow you've decided to leave behind to find your own tree? Let's build this community of survivors together. Thank you for listening.